Have you ever looked someone in the eye and felt it, the instant they realized you saw through them, not just their words, but their intent, the charm, the concern, the carefully crafted smiles no longer worked? In that moment, something subtle but unmistakable shifts. You are no longer under their spell, and they know it. What happens next is not random, it is calculated. Because when someone with a hidden agenda feels exposed, they change their tactics. And if you are not prepared, their next move can leave you questioning your clarity or even your sanity. But the Stoics knew how to face this. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca did not teach us to fight fire with fire. They taught us to become fireproof, to remain steady in the storm, unmoved by the noise, and anchored in truth. In this video, we will explore 6 things bad people often do when they know you see them clearly, and more importantly, how you can respond without losing your peace or your power. If you have ever felt that unsettling shift in energy and wondered what it meant, stay with me. You are about to gain clarity that protects more than just your heart. It protects your mind. Let's begin. 1. They try to flip the narrative. There is a specific moment when a manipulator realizes the mask has slipped. You have seen through their charm. You are no longer seduced by their praise or guilted by their silence. You have spotted the distortion in real time. And when they sense that clarity in your eyes, they do not retreat. They recalibrate. The first move is not apology, it is reversal. They try to flip the narrative. Suddenly, you are not the one who has awakened. You are the one who is overreacting. You are too sensitive, too emotional, imagining things. They play the victim before you even accuse them, not because they are hurt, but because they are strategic, if they can discredit your perception before it takes root. They regain control not by truth, but by confusion. This is not clumsy denial, it is psychological offense, and it is aimed precisely where good people are most vulnerable. Your desire to be fair, your aversion to conflict, your deep belief that accusing someone without hard proof feels unjust. Manipulators use this internal nobility against you. They want you to hesitate, to second guess, to begin explaining what you know in your bones. Because the moment you begin defending your insight just to feel heard is the moment they reclaim the stage. That is the trap. And it does not come with shouting, it comes with calm, calculated reversal. You start to feel like the villain for naming what they have done. This is where Stoicism becomes more than a philosophy. It becomes a compass. Because the Stoics did not teach us to argue our truth, they taught us to embody it. Marcus Aurelius did not write journals full of rebuttals. He wrote reminders to live with integrity, to walk with clarity, to respond with reason. He said, "If someone can prove me wrong, I will gladly change. But if not, I will keep walking my path." This is not arrogance. It is alignment, a deep knowing that truth does not need applause to remain true. So when someone tries to flip the story, to make your clarity look like instability, your courage look like drama, do not chase their approval. Do not scramble to correct their version. You are not required to compete with lies. You are only required to live your truth so consistently that the distortion cannot hold over time. That is not silence. That is strategy. The Stoic does not engage every battle. He understands that reaction is fuel. And when you withdraw that fuel, the fire dies. That does not mean it will not hurt. Being misunderstood cuts deep. Being blamed for seeing clearly can feel like betrayal layered with shame. But emotional pain, as Epictetus would remind us, is not proof that we are wrong. It is proof that something matters. And when something matters, we do not destroy it in defense. We protect it in stillness, in focus, in the disciplined refusal to be baited back into confusion. You do not owe anyone your voice if they have already dismissed your vision. You owe yourself your steadiness. Let them call you difficult. Let them whisper that you are overreacting. The people who know your character will feel the truth in your silence. And those who never cared to see it were never on your side to begin with. This is only the beginning of the manipulator's playbook. When flipping the narrative stops working, when even their false victimhood becomes exhausting to maintain, they often move to something colder. They stop arguing. They stop rewriting. They pretend nothing ever happened. And that silence is not peace. It is a new tactic, and it comes next. But for now, remember this: your clarity is not a problem. Your awareness is not an accusation. It is a signal that you have grown beyond their reach. Hold that ground. You are not the villain. You are simply awake. And that, to someone who thrives on deception, is the most threatening thing of all. 2. They pretend nothing happened. When a manipulator sees that their game has been exposed, not all will react with rage or defensiveness. Some take a more deceptive route. They go quiet, not as an act of humility, but of calculation. And then, as if summoned by some strange rhythm, they reappear. A simple message, a casual like on your post, a smile in public that feels too easy. It is not a coincidence. It is not awkwardness. It is not denial. It is a test. What they are truly asking is this: will you pretend with me? Will you ignore what happened so I do not have to take responsibility? Will you step back into the illusion so I never have to face the truth? There is no apology, no explanation, just a smooth return to the familiar rhythm of the past, as if the wound they inflicted left no scar. But this is not healing, it is strategy. It is the manipulator's quietest move, but perhaps their most dangerous, because it plays on something sacred in you: your longing for peace, your desire to be fair, your discomfort with judgment. You hesitate to push back. You want to believe people can change, and so you entertain the moment. But here is what the Stoics knew: peace that is built on forgetting is not peace at all. It is erosion. This tactic works because it invites you to override your instincts, to question the voice in you that says, this is not right. And that is the exact moment where power shifts. If you respond to their return with warmth, even politeness, they take that as proof. Not proof of forgiveness, but proof that their manipulation worked, that they were never truly held accountable, not because they earned redemption, but because you were too noble to enforce consequence. But Stoicism teaches something much deeper. It does not teach cruelty. It teaches clarity. Marcus Aurelius never advised vengeance. He advised discernment. He reminded us that we are not obligated to restore what someone else chose to destroy. So when they return as if nothing ever happened, you do not need to rage, you do not need to argue, but you also do not need to comply. You simply stand firm. Imagine a person who cut deeply into your trust, now returning with a smile but no acknowledgement. Do not slam the door, but do not open it wide either. Let your silence become a threshold they must earn their way across. Watch their actions, hear the rhythm behind their words. Let time, not sentiment, reveal if any growth has taken place. Because reappearance is not transformation, and kindness without accountability is not virtue. It is manipulation in disguise. You may feel guilty for not responding. You may feel the urge to meet them halfway, especially when they offer no obvious harm. But the Stoics would remind you, forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. You can let go of the anger without letting go of the lesson. You can release the weight of bitterness and still remember where the blade landed. You can move forward without circling back. Do not trade your peace for performance. Do not confuse social comfort with emotional clarity. And when others accuse you of being distant, Remind yourself that distance is often the clearest form of self-respect. You are not cold, you are conscious. You are not harsh, you are healing. And if this quiet boundary unsettles them, if your refusal to pretend threatens their illusion, that is when many manipulators take their next step. They do not confront, they conspire. When charm and familiarity fail, they retreat into whispers and shadows. But that is a chapter for another lesson. For now, let this truth anchor you. You do not owe re-entry to someone who refused to bring truth. You owe yourself the strength to stay awake and the courage to remain unmoved. That is not resentment. That is wisdom in action. That is the Stoic path. 3. They try to undermine you behind closed doors. When a toxic person realizes that you have seen through their performance, the illusion they carefully constructed begins to unravel. What was once effortless control, built on your hesitation, your silence, your uncertainty, begins to collapse, and in its place rises fear. Not the kind that trembles in the open, but a quiet, corrosive fear of losing relevance, of being exposed, of no longer holding power over your perception. But fear, in those who lack the courage to face themselves, rarely leads to reflection. It morphs into something darker, sabotage, not with confrontation, but with quiet erosion. They do not confront you directly. That would expose their vulnerability. Instead, they strike from the shadows, whispers in conversations you are not part of, subtle distortions of your intentions, your words, your behavior. They offer concern that sounds caring but is poisoned with implication. They say things like, "I just think they're not doing well," or "something seems off lately." These are not observations. They are weapons dressed in sympathy. Their aim is simple: to make others doubt you before you can speak for yourself, to quietly shift perception while maintaining a mask of innocence. And what makes this tactic so devastating is its invisibility. You often do not know you are being undermined until the effects are already in motion. People grow distant without explanation. Opportunities vanish without reason. The space around you becomes colder, and the source is hard to trace. Your natural instinct may be to respond, to defend, to explain, to rush into battle for your own name. But here lies the Stoic distinction. If you enter the battlefield on their terms, you are no longer playing your game. You are reacting to theirs, Seneca once said. The sign of a great mind is its ability to rise above insult. Not because it is blind, but because it refuses to be led by emotion. This is the Stoic's advantage. You do not have to fight every whisper. You do not have to chase every lie. Instead, you build a life so honest, so steady, that deception has no foundation to stand on. When someone tries to twist your character, let your consistency expose their fiction. Live in such alignment with your values that gossip becomes noise and your presence becomes clarity. This does not mean silence is your only answer. It means your responses are chosen, not pulled out of you. You speak with intention when needed, but you do not allow yourself to be dragged into a reputation war. The Stoics taught that reputation is a wind we cannot always catch. But character is a fire we can always tend. And the truth, unlike slander, does not scream. It endures. It reveals itself not in reactions, but in patterns, over time. Those who matter will begin to see the difference between the story and the substance. You will lose people in this process. Some will believe what is easy rather than what is real. Let them. The ones who vanish were never allies of truth. But what remains will be gold, your peace, your dignity, your ability to sleep at night knowing that you never betrayed yourself for the comfort of false validation. And that is the highest form of power. So when you feel the effects of being undermined from the shadows, remember this: you are not powerless, you are not voiceless, you are not alone. You are simply being refined. What they use to harm you becomes the forge that sharpens your integrity. The truth needs no armor when it is worn like skin. You do not have to explain who you are to those determined not to see it. You just have to keep living like someone who cannot be shaken by lies. And when sabotage fails to bring you back, when your refusal to fall apart frustrates them, many will pivot again, this time not with attack, but with appearance. They will return looking softer, wiser, transformed. But is that healing or another performance? That is the next mask and the next lesson. Stay awake. Because those who once wore deception as armor rarely walk away from control without trying one last time. 4. They suddenly change to win you back. When their lies lose power, when charm no longer captivates, and even sabotage fails to make you bend, a manipulator often reaches for their most deceptive tool yet, the illusion of transformation. They stop denying, stop defending, and begin to pivot. Suddenly, the same person who once dismissed your pain now speaks in softened tones. They offer support. They reflect. They say things like, "I've been doing a lot of thinking," or "I want to become better." And, for a brief moment, it feels like you are finally witnessing the version of them you always hoped was hidden beneath the chaos. But this shift is rarely about healing. It is about access. What they seek is not reconciliation, but re-entry. And the most dangerous part of it all is that it feels real, especially when you've spent weeks or months longing for evidence that your pain mattered to them. When you see their sudden warmth, you may be tempted to believe that maybe, just maybe, your clarity inspired their growth. But this is where the Stoic steps back and listens with more than ears. This is where hope must walk hand in hand with discernment. Manipulators do not always change by maturing. Often, they change by recalibrating. They study what no longer works and shift their strategy accordingly. If guilt no longer binds you, they pivot to vulnerability. If pressure fails, they try sincerity. It is not emotional growth. It is tactical adaptation. And that is why Stoicism matters here more than ever. Not to harden you, but to sharpen you. Not to eliminate your capacity for compassion, but to ground it in wisdom. Marcus Aurelius warned that the greatest revenge is not to resemble those who once caused harm. That means you do not respond to emotional bait with emotional surrender. You do not race to embrace someone who has only changed their tone, not their truth. The Stoic observes with patience, not paranoia. They track behavior over time, not in isolated moments, because real transformation is never loud. It is revealed quietly, in the way someone honors your boundaries without being asked, in how they repair, not with words, but with consistent action. And most of all, true change never demands trust. It earns it. I remember someone close to me who went through this exact cycle after enduring months of belittlement and subtle manipulation. She finally drew a line. She stepped away. And suddenly, everything shifted. The very person who once mocked her limits began praising her independence. They spoke of growth, therapy, and self-awareness. They echoed back to her the very language she'd once used, as if quoting her pain could become proof of change. And for a time, she softened. She reopened the door just enough to believe. But soon, the familiar cracks returned. The smiles held tension. The compliments were conditional. The kindness had been a temporary act. It was not healing, it was bait. This is what makes false change so dangerous. It does not scream, it whispers. It offers just enough sincerity to lure you back, only to resume the cycle once your defense is lower. The Stoic path here is not to distrust everyone who shows change. It is to trust yourself more, your intuition, your memory, your reason. You stay respectful, you stay calm, but you let time be the gatekeeper, because consistency, not charisma, is the true language of growth. You do not rebuild just because someone wants you to forget. Forgiveness may be given, but trust is never automatic. It is earned, or it is withheld. So when the manipulator comes back with soft words and wide eyes, you do not need to attack. You do not need to explain. You simply wait. Time will either confirm their evolution or expose their performance, and in that stillness, you remain in power. You do not melt at the warmth of change. You watch for its light. Because for those who cannot win you with truth, the next move will not be reformation. It will be infiltration, subtle pressure, disguised as harmless connection, but the Stoic sees it coming long before it arrives. And they do not flinch. They prepare. They remain anchored. They remain free. 5. They push your boundaries subtly. When someone manipulative senses that their grip on you has loosened, they do not always respond with obvious aggression. More often, they retreat into subtlety. They do not charge the gates. They test the walls, slowly, quietly. A message appears out of nowhere, just thinking about you. A vague comment slips into a post. A memory is casually brought up in a group chat. It all seems light, almost accidental, almost harmless, but it is not. It is a probe, a way of tapping the glass to see if it still holds. These gestures are not expressions of care. They are strategic measurements. They want to know if your boundary was a true decision or just a temporary reaction. And if you respond, even with politeness, they see it as permission. If you explain, they treat it as an opening to negotiate. And if you ignore them, they escalate just slightly, pushing a little harder each time until they either find a way back in or are finally blocked by something they can no longer manipulate. This phase is where many people fall back into old cycles, not because the manipulator has done something overtly cruel, but because the pressure is familiar. Familiarity creates confusion. It feels easier to respond than to resist, easier to be kind than to be firm. But Stoic philosophy reminds us that boundaries are not merely spoken, they are lived, and they are protected not by anger, but by consistency. Epictetus taught that while we cannot control what others do, we are always in control of how we respond. That is where real power lives, not in reaction, but in restraint. I once watched this unfold in the life of someone named Jordan. After months of subtle gaslighting and emotional depletion from someone close to her, she made a conscious decision to step away. No arguments, no dramatic exit, just a clear and calm boundary. No more contact. She honored it without hostility. But the other person did not challenge it. They waited, and after a few weeks of silence, a message arrived. Short, friendly, vague, just enough to reopen the emotional door if she chose to step through it. Then came the group thread. A mutual friend casually dropped. They asked about you, said they miss your energy. It was soft, familiar, disarming, and for a moment, Jordan felt the pull. Not because she forgot what happened, but because she did not want to seem cold. That is how subtle manipulation works. It does not prey on your flaws. It preys on your virtues, your empathy, your fairness, your longing to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time is different. But the Stoic path is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming clear. You do not need to explain your silence to someone who once ignored your voice. You do not need to respond to bait disguised as goodwill. Silence, when rooted in self-respect, is not cruelty. It is clarity, and clarity is often the only language a manipulator cannot distort. To hold a boundary without shouting, without proving, without trembling, is to declare that your peace is no longer negotiable. It is to say, not with rage, but with resolve, I am no longer available for your confusion. The strongest boundaries are not the ones we shout in defense, they are the ones we live in quiet discipline. Over time, that quiet becomes louder than any confrontation ever could. Because when you consistently hold the line, you teach people not how to treat you, but what you will no longer tolerate. Yet even this strength does not guarantee peace. Not everyone will take your silence with grace. When subtle pressure fails, when emotional nudges find no crack, some manipulators do not walk away. They pivot. They do not try to change your mind anymore. They try to change the minds of those around you. They move their tactics from personal to public, and instead of reaching for reconciliation, they reach for narrative control. They begin crafting a new version of the story, not to win you back, but to discredit you completely. And that is where we go next. Because when a person can no longer control your perception, they try to control how others perceive you. But even here, Stoicism offers an answer, not with retaliation, but with resilience. Not with explanation, but with embodiment. You do not chase reputation, you live in alignment. And over time, the truth does what the manipulator cannot. It endures. So if you have ever felt the subtle pressure of someone who refuses to respect your distance, stay grounded. You are not weak for staying silent. You are strong for choosing peace over performance. The next test will not be private, it will be social. But even then, you are ready, because you know who you are, and no one can distort that unless you let them. Let's continue. If you have ever stood in that quiet storm where someone's mask falls and the truth finally reveals itself, know this: you are not alone and you are not powerless. The Stoics endured betrayal, slander, and mind games long before us. What gave them strength was not revenge, but reason, not noise, but clarity. And that same wisdom still lives in you, because what you saw was real, and what you chose to see clearly and to stand firm is not weakness. It is the beginning of true power. When someone realizes they can no longer deceive you, the games do not stop, they shift. But you do not need to shift with them. You rise, quietly, without drama, without permission. The moment you stopped needing their approval was the moment you stepped back into your strength. And strength does not perform, it simply is. Let your stillness speak louder than any argument. Let your peace become the answer to every silent test. That is Stoicism in action. If this message reached something deep in you, take a breath and comment below with just 2 words, I see. Let it be a quiet affirmation that you are no longer confused, you are awake. And if you know someone who is walking through this same fire, send this their way. Let them know their clarity is not madness, it is growth. If this resonated with your journey, consider subscribing so we can keep building this strength together. You are not here to play games. You are here to become unshakable. And the next step begins now.